You're listening to Arts Alive, and Stephen Johnson, author of Boxed, and before that, Tugga's Mob is our guest. And we better talk about Boxed, Stephen, because after all, that's the purpose of our conversation. How much do you want to give away?
That's always the hardest question. It really is, because do you give the story? But basically, Boxed is set against the tapestry of the greyhound racing industry. And I use that from experience, having worked for the New Zealand Racing Board and producing a greyhound racing program. But you'll be pleased to know that no greyhounds are harmed in the making of this story. But essentially, it's about three women who find their fate a lie by a killer who's hell-bent on revenge. And the story starts with the mystery woman who's being held captive but is determined to survive. The second woman...
I was going to say before we go on, and that's a really enigmatic thing that you start off really just a one-page called Day 131. And this day creeps through the whole story so that 8 days later we actually know what's happening and there is resolution.
And I do like the fast resolution in my stories. It's something I've sort of enjoyed, that it helps keep the pace going, but also, that just suits my style of writing. So, but I love that mystery, enigmatic element about the woman. And then we come back to our spotlight crew, and so we find out about Jo Koskothic, who's the production assistant, who finds herself betrayed by her lover, who's an animal activist. He's using her as a pawn. And the other woman is reporter Kim Prescott. She's very idealistic, very ambitious, and leads the team into an adventure that puts their lives at risk. So the story is based on a tip-off that live baiting is continuing in the greyhound racing industry. We all know the expose by Four Corners in 2015 horrified the world. The animals being tied to lures and dogs being blooded on them. It was horrific photos to see, and almost closed the industry in New South Wales and led to big changes and reforming in animal welfare. So that's sort of the reason to get into the story. So anyway, Kim is given a tip that this is happening at a property in the country up near Stiglitz, the old gold mining town. They go up there to get the evidence. They're going to sneak into the property late at night, set up some cameras, catch the trainer in the act the next day. They arrive on the site and they smell something very strange, very, very awful. They go to the starting gates, but it's not what they expect to find. There's a body inside. So from there, the events unfold. Who's responsible for this? Is it people in the greyhound racing industry? Is it the Hound Liberation Party who are fighting to end greyhound racing? Or is it someone else totally different?
And we don't actually find out who it is until about, I started guessing at about page 240 out of 280 pages. So you keep the red herrings well displayed throughout the first two-thirds of the book. That which leads me to the question, how much do you plan this whole thing out? Because the twists and turns are so unexpected, and as you say, the resolution is all stacked into the last 20, 30 pages of the novel. And it was very much the same with Tugga's Mob. Most of that happened in about the last 10 pages. So that suggests to me a great deal of planning on your hand, your part.
Yeah, I love red herrings in thriller stories. That's my preference, and I think a lot of other people do as well. And so writers are either plotters or pantsers. I'm very much a plotter. I love brainstorming the idea. And although I can be fluid, I can be flexible along the way. And possibly the confidence sort of coming from Tugga's Mob taught me that don't be scared to change the storyline if you think, it can work differently. And, that's what happened with this one. A character who was supposed to be dead at the end of the book was brought back to life. So you develop godlike powers in a way. And, I think it works rather well.
Well, one thing that surprised me, though, reading it, was that a character whom you more or less consigned to the scrap heap of history, a chap named Hatchet, at the end of Tugga's Mob, suddenly and unexpectedly returns into a position of power. Now, is this an example of what you mean?
Yes, very much so. Because the hatchet was such a vile character, journalists who don't like the people who hold the purse strings in broadcasting, and sort of a chance of revenge. But there was another reason for that, because he also has a peripheral mention in the third book. But I plan to make him the feature in the fourth book. He will once again find himself a target, and it will relate back to Tugga's mob.
So we'll have to wait about 3 years before we find out whether he survives.
Well, that's the thing, that it is such a long process to get to this point. Box was ready to go, quite a while ago, but it was sort of held back because of the pandemic. I haven't been able to get to Australia to, help with the promotion of it. It came out just before Christmas. I literally have boxes and boxes of books sitting here in the attic in New Zealand, but I can't do a launch. My last public engagement was August 13 last year because of COVID. We may get back to that in another couple of months, but I'm going to be back in Melbourne in April after Easter, and I'll be doing some engagements then and talking to people, and then I'll be able to sort of just get out and promote the book much more, and then come home and finish edits on these other 3 books and get down to writing the fate of the hatchet again.
Well as exploring the dynamics of a television current affairs newsroom, you also explore a little more of the dynamics of the relationship between journalists and the police. What is, in this story and in the previous one, a tug of war about information, priorities, and rights to investigate. Is that a reflection of the real dynamics?
Sometimes the relationship can be very fraught with friction. Other times, yes, it can get on very well. The police certainly don't want the media dabbling in their in their affairs. And most of the time the media will know the no-go zones. I probably got my reporters pushing the boundary a little bit, but I've tried to paint it that they're guesswork at this stage. Even the suspect is not on the police radar. They're just following possible leads and ideas. Here and probably in Australia, if any journalists stray too far, yes, they would be slapped down. But quite a lot of the time, there's a lot of inside information and inside sharing of knowledge to help each other. Tips are given to favoured media to stir up stories. In other cases, the police, help reporters to push along the inquiry.
So it does require cooperation as well as competition between these two, in a sense, investigative forces.
Very much so, yeah. And it's nothing you'll never. It's very fluid, that relationship. It can ebb and flow from town to town, city to city, department to department. I can remember I used to produce a police program here in New Zealand with Peter Brock. It was focused on supposedly the motorways. This is when reality TV kicked off and cameras were put in police cars. And that was a very strong relationship we had with New Zealand police here. That program developed to other areas of the police. They saw the publicity the motorway patrol was getting, and suddenly I was getting the burglary squad calling me. I was getting the team policing squad calling me, saying, come out with us, show people the work we do. So the police, they do an incredible job, very supportive of them. And, there are times the negative publicity can sort of, tarnish the image unfairly. So I was, very grateful to be able to help them and also to get a program. We were this was 23, 24 years ago, so we were probably very much at the forefront of the reality TV for police, the border patrols and those sort of programs. So the forces have learned that the media can assist them, and at the same time they can control the message during those productions. So it's a compatible relationship that can work for broadcaster and for the forces.
And you also raise, of course, the ethical issues involved, because our Kim Prescott has got an eye for Detective Sergeant Potter.
Yes, yes. That was a tricky one. I thought the relationships do happen between media and police. Quite often they can be difficult and tricky. You know, the boundaries that can't be crossed, walls have to go up. So I just wanted to portray that side of things. It's a very early relationship. That, you know, will it take off or will it sort of fizzle? That's something that we will find later on.
I see, and we'll have to wait for the next edition of the Channel 5 Spotlight saga. This one's called Boxed. The first one was called Tugga's Mob, and the one due out next year will be called?
At this stage it's called Goose Bay. Kim Prescott and Joe Trescothick go on a motorhome tour of New Zealand. They find themselves being chased by a cyclone down the country as they head towards Queenstown, and there are other criminal forces gathering in Kaikoura in the South Island. So everything comes to a climax in Kaikoura, where the motorhome breaks down on the waterline with the cyclone about to descend upon them.
And would I be giving something away if I said this was partially based on your own touring New Zealand in a motorhome experience?
No, that's fair enough to say. It's very much based on that. I'm sort of literally encapsulating experiences that my wife and I had when we got trapped 40 metres from the seafront when a motorhome broke down. The cyclone hit, and literally the whole landscape collapsed around us. You know, we survived, thank goodness, but it took us 12 days to get the motorhome off the coast.
Well, Stephen Johnson's been our guest today. He's the author of Boxed, the second crime thriller set in the Channel 5 Spotlight Current Affairs program Newsroom, and it's a good read. And I thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you very much.